Hello, friends, you're back. This is episode 2 of Katiebird's Garden Podcast, and I'm your host, Kate. Today's show is titled Seed Starting, Winter Sowing, and 2023 Garden Planning. My son and I were driving to an activity on Monday night, and I noticed someone had plant party lights up in their window. What are plant party lights? Those are the super awesome disco-looking, they're bright fuchsia or purple LED grow lights that people now can buy for their plants for seed starting. And they literally light up a whole room and a backyard like this person's does. And they're super bright and pretty. I love them. But I was just so curious as to what they're started already, because at least for here it is about 16 weeks until our last frost date of May 11th. And I mean, I'm getting a little edgy and really do want to start something, but it's a little bit too early for me. But one should never judge another on what they're growing under lights. You just don't know. Last year it froze in mid-April, so we can't totally depend on the last frost dates. Usually here in the Zone 4-ish areas of Minnesota, Mother's Day is usually pretty safe to plant your tender plants and greenhouse flowers you may buy. Not always, obviously. It can freeze after that, so you always should have your towels and old sheets at the ready besides your patio doors, just in case you got to run out at 10 o'clock after seeing the news, learning it's going to freeze. If you're wondering what zones are in frost-free days, what those actually mean, zones are regional and geographical areas that are grouped by the lowest average temperature that they can go down to in the winter. Most plants are labeled for what zone they'll most likely survive. So you may see Zone 3, which is a lower zone, that's northern Minnesota. Zone 4 is us in the central Twin Cities, Minnesota, and then southern Minnesota can get into the 5s, and 6, 7s are these temperate zones that they can plant fall gardens, sometimes over winter plants. Sometimes they're a little jealous of them. Frost-free days are the number of days from the last frost until the first frost, so spring till fall. So this can vary within a zone, so it's easiest just to Google your zip code to see how many days you have to grow within. Knowing the actual number of days can help you choose flower and vegetable varieties and make sure that they'll grow in the time period that you have. I mean, sometimes you can find plants and vegetables that if they take more than 100 days, you really need to hope that your fall frost doesn't show up at 100 days, because you may just get like one pepper or one vegetable. So it's really hard to not be tempted to purchase some of these new varieties that our sun-abundant southern friends get to grow and have great successes and long seasons. But if a pepper takes over 120 days until maturity, you may just get a couple peppers. And those plants get big because they take that long. So the plants get big and bushy. And if you only have 120 days of warm weather before it frosts, you're going to get 6 to 10 peppers. And really is that, 3 to 4 foot space it took up, is that worth 5 to 10 peppers that you could buy at a grocery store for a couple bucks? Probably not. You can plant a lot of green beans in that space, as I have learned, and I choose to do so. But it does help to think about that. Is how big is a plant, and is it worth the couple fruits or vegetables that you're going to get from it? So keep that in mind. I mean, if you really want to try something, it's gardening. That's what it's for. It's to try to grow new things, see what they taste like, see if you like them. It's up to every single person what they like to do. So last summer we grew some of the super hot tropical peppers like ghost peppers and Trinidad scorpions. Like, we planted all the things, and really a lot of them just sort of were a waste of space. The ones that took 100 to 120 days, like I said, the bushes grow really nice because they have a long season to grow, but really they had 10 or less peppers on each one, so it's not worth the time or the space that they took up. It was cool to have them. We did end up drying some and just using them. I don't even know what. Mixed them in with some seasoning, I think. Habaneros and jalapenos really grow really well here because they're 75 and 90 days for both. And so they have a nice season. The bushes get nice and big, and we get plenty of fruit from those. And a little secret is habaneros, they really keep the squirrels away from the sweet peppers. So if you want to get more sweet peppers and want to keep the squirrels out of your garden, plant some habaneros around them. It really works. We had those growing up until it frosted, like a hard killing frost. They lasted that long. And so if it was warmer for longer, they would have kept growing, because there was plenty of smaller fruits on there that were still green, so they weren't edible really, but there was plenty. They really liked it. If we do the super hot varieties again, I think we're going to put them in patio pots or like those big grow bags. I got a couple of those just so that they're mobile. And if we do have an early frost or just start getting some cold nights, but the days are still super hot, so we can, bring them up on the deck so it's a little warmer, or even bring them inside if we really need to. So we're going to try that, see if that works, see if it's worthwhile, maybe we'll get 20 or 30 peppers out of these plants, because some of them can grow 4 to 6 feet and just be prolific if it's the right space and temperature. So we never know. Gardening is an experiment. So I highly suggest reading your seed packets and even looking up on the internet, looking up growth habits and looking at pictures, because sometimes they don't say how tall or how big plants are going to get. And if you're hell-bent on growing something that you saw someone down in Texas or Arkansas, you should look it up and see how it grows. And then think too, my season's not as warm, it may be shorter, so you might get something, or it may not be as good as you think it could be. And then you can just buy them or wish them luck. What we do here in Minnesota, which is, I'm a zone 4B, so it's a slightly warmer zone 4, I guess, just a teeny bit, 5-10 degrees maybe. We try to work around our short growing seasons by doing 2 things. One, starting our seeds inside a couple weeks before the last frost date. And most seed packages do tell you when you can start it before the last frost date, because unless you're in one of those really warm climates, peppers, tomatoes, most things need to start a couple weeks before we can put them outside, because even then our ground is not warm enough for the roots to really take hold and grow. So that's why we start things inside. I think the average is 6 to 8 weeks for most things. Some peppers and tomatoes, you can start 10 to 12 weeks before your last frost. It just depends on the variety of vegetable or flower. One thing to remember is the earlier you start, the more you're going to have to pot up, because the plants do get bigger. Just because they take so long doesn't mean they don't grow. I mean, once they start growing, they get tall. So you can pinch off some things, and some things you don't want to pinch off. We've had years where we have had to take out shelves in the greenhouse just so our plants still needed to be in there for a couple of weeks, but they were reaching up into the next level. You sort of have to count backwards, is how many of the biggest pots you have can fit on a tray, and then think about, do I need to remove one of the shelves in order for the super tall things to fit? So just count backwards from what you can totally fill it up with, and then divide up what you want to grow by that. I actually had to buy a second greenhouse because most of the plants that I did start ahead probably a little too early, got really big, and I think we had a cool spring too, so I just had to keep them in longer than normal. So I did have to take out shelves, and some things ended up living on the floor, and so just be prepared to do that. I mean, these inside metal and plastic, essentially it's a tent over the little metal setup. They're anywhere from $40 to $60. They're not very big. They can be anywhere from 3 feet wide to maybe almost 6 feet tall. So they just sort of fit in front of a window, or you can shove them in a corner, and you just buy yourself some grow lights and you have a nice little setup. And unless you have vast windows in a southern exposure area, you need to have grow lights and probably a greenhouse in order to ensure that the plant babies get enough light and moisture each day to grow, because plants do require 8 to 12 hours of light to really get going, produce leaves, and just grow their best sprout life. Providing enough light will keep them from getting leggy. It's when your little tiny sprouts get super tall, and then they only have 2 leaves. And then a lot of times they just sort of shrivel up in the middle and die. So that's called damping off. Some people say because it's too wet, but some people say it's because they're leggy. So I don't know what it is, but you can look that up. Short, stout plants are preferred when they're small and starting, so they get a solid stem and good leaf structure. Another helpful thing are seed mats. So they give you a jump start on sprouting seeds. Some seeds, like pepper seeds, need heat. They need it to be really warm in the dirt, and they need it to be moist. So seed mats can keep things at a good 10 degrees warmer than the ambient temperature. So if your house is around 70 degrees, the heat mats will keep the dirt around 80 degrees, which is perfect for starting peppers and tomatoes and anything that loves the heat. You gotta remember that a lot of these plants are tropical plants that have been hybridized to live in our colder areas for very short seasons. Having those mats, they can get days off of the days to germination number listed on your seed packets. So a lot of time that's anywhere from 7 to 14 days that the packets say, but if you put things on a heat mat, it can just be 5 to 7 days. Some things will sprout, so it does save you some time if you need to. Let's see, also I'll link my grow lights and my indoor greenhouses and seed mats that I've used before. I'll put those links in the show notes of this episode. The second thing that we northern growers can do is winter sow. You've probably seen the hashtag or reels or mentions of this on the local news or on Instagram. Any of the things people are doing this, probably starting now in some areas. I think it's a little early for here. I mean, Minnesota's frozen right now. It doesn't really matter. There's not a lot of sun. We keep getting more snow, which you do want snow for this process, but I think People could wait a little while in order to find a decent spot that's not going to get more snow to cover everything because you don't want to lose it. So what is this magical thing I speak of? So it's actually a pretty cool process. You save milk jugs or water bottles or larger juice jugs. You wash them, of course, drill a couple holes in the bottom, and then you cut them in half, but you leave, it works out nicely if you leave anywhere from 2 to 3 inches not cut by the handle side, so you can sort of open it on a hinge, if that makes sense. When it is generally the coldest part of the late winter, February, early March, you actually put dirt in the bottom, 2 or 3 inches. You plant seeds, you get the soil a little bit wet, not too wet, you don't really need it that much. And then you close the lids meaning the top half of the jug, and you tape it shut with duct tape. And you're creating a mini greenhouse because the sun will heat it up inside. You set these in snow, and so those will soak up the dampness from the snow and keep the soil just wet enough while it's still frozen outside. And as the weather warms up, the snow and rain will water the dirt. And you want to keep the top off, like the actual screw tops. Don't put those back on. Throw those away or recycle those. You don't want to close this up because it needs to be like a greenhouse and have ventilation. And be sure to label because these all look the same in the snow. And so the snow and the rain will gently water the dirt through the top. The tiny hole, it works. Somehow it all gets moist, and then it also gets moist through the bottom because as it warms up, snow melts, the ground warms up. They preferably would be in a slightly sheltered southern facing location, just so you get more sun because there is no sunlight in Minnesota to grow anything at this time. So the more you can get, the better. When the days are getting longer, the sun will get warmer and we'll have more of it, so more hours of sunlight each day. And the snow will melt, and just inside the carton, it'll start to warm up. And once it hits the perfect temperature for these cold, hardy seeds, herbs, perennial flowers, they will sprout. It can freeze at night. It'll be nice and warm during the day from the sun. And as they do get older, it will dry out a little bit, especially if your snow starts to melt wherever they are. So you do want to water it if needed or spritz in the container. You can even open them up when it starts to really warm up because it'll get hot in there and you don't want to cook your sprouts. Once again, be sure they're in a good spot. Last year I had mine in a southern area, good for light, but it wasn't very protected from the wind, and we just didn't have enough snow where that was, and they ended up blowing all over the place. The dirt and the seeds got all mixed up. It was a mess. Not much grew. Some onions and kale and herbs that survived their tumble in their container, they did grow just fine. They always grow. But I am not going to do the same spot. So I will remember that. We all learn from our mistakes, and I said just to keep notes so you remember what happened or what you thought of doing the next time. It is cold, hardy, early spring plants that grow well, and those are the ones that you can actually plant in the dirt. When a lot of these seed packets say plant when you can work the soil. So it is still darn cold, usually, mid-April. The soil is workable. It's very cold, but things like kale, onions, spinach, lettuces, some herbs, perennial flowers will also go through this and grow pretty well. A lot of perennial plants and herbs prefer and need a cold stratification period, which is when it's cold, moist, and essentially their seeds freeze. So they need that in order to produce a plant the next year and to even flower. So you can think of echinacea, purpurea. That generally takes a year to flower. So sometimes you can force it by, giving it a cold stratification through winter sowing, and you might get a flower the first year. It's not going to be very big. Like, you should let the plant grow a little bit, but you may get a flower that first year. Second year, they'll go bonkers. You don't want to use root vegetables because think of these, you don't want to, disturb their roots. Radishes, kohlrabis, early carrots, spring peas, anything else that literally says on the packet, do not sow indoor or sow ahead of time in transplant because they don't like their roots bothered. A lot of these too are super short growing, like radishes take 25 to 30 days. I think you can just wait till it's radish season, April. When the ground is workable, you can plant them and they'll grow just the same. Let's see, what have I got next? Oh, a good tip is if you have a hard time collecting enough milk or juice jugs because maybe you're single or you just don't drink milk or juice, ask your neighbors or coworkers or friends. Just ask anybody, do you have any spare milk jugs or juice containers that they could share with you? Most people will be like, sure. I just usually throw them in my recycle bin. So it's not a hassle for most people, just probably remembering. So if you know when it's recycled in your neighborhood, you could just ask the day before any of your neighbors, say, hey, do you have any milk jugs for me? Can I have it? Thank you. And it always works nicely to offer some of the final veggie spoils or plants or flowers once they're ready to harvest, and you can say, hey, I used your milk jug to grow this kale, so thank you. They'll appreciate that. Speaking of harvest, let's talk about what new seeds I've already ordered and received. I ordered before Christmas. I was ahead of the game here. And I'm also going to give my opinion and just some tips on each company and a little review of seed packet design. So these are important tools. The seed packets, they have pictures, they tell you what to do, they have important technical information. The first company is Baker Creek Seed. Their website is rareseeds.com, I believe. They have a couple different names they use. They're from Missouri. The pros of their packets are that they have bright photographs, detailed descriptions, and company-wide, they have a really large variety of international varieties. They have a lot of those, a lot of things to choose from. So that's a really cool catalog to get. It's brightly colored. The color thing is also a con for them because sometimes the colors are overly edited. So like Photoshop is used a lot on some of their seed packets. And then you may buy some of these beautiful looking flowers and they are not the color shown or listed at all. And also, they don't list days to harvest. And I have a lot of different things from them, and I cannot find on most the days or maturity number. So that's an important thing to know because, like I just spoke about earlier in the podcast, was how many days do we have to grow? So that is a very important number. I've had to look up every single thing I've bought from there to see the days to harvest. And I usually write it on the back of the seed packet. So use your seed packets. I don't know many people that use up a whole packet each year, so I write notes, I write down the missing information. This year, my newest things from Baker Creek are a pink Senorita Zinnia, and that's one of those shaggy cactus varieties. So it's just the shaggy petals. The pink looks like a pinky coral, which I always love. So I'm hoping they turn out that way. And then I also got with some of the Queen Lime Orange. I'd rather they be not so orange, but you never know. With these zinnia varieties, they come in all kinds of different crazy colors and shapes, so they're always fun. And there's also a Cosmos Apricota, which is it's a lighter fuchsia Cosmos. Not the usual, at least the Cosmos that I always see are just basic pink and sort of lavender color, but these are just pretty pink and they're fluffy. They have the ruffly feathers, I was going to say, ruffly petals. So that's what I got from Baker Creek's this year. Oh, and I got some different lemon balms too, or bee balms, I should say. Bee balms. They had some different bee balm varieties, different colors of purple. I got the spotted bee balm, which is a green and purple variety. It looks like they're the double flowers. And then I also got a lemon bee balm, which is supposed to have a lemon flavor to it. And that's a nice fuchsia purple color. It looks like the stacked double flower looking ones also. And then the next company that I ordered from is M.I. Gardner. Some people call it My Gardner, but it's M.I. Gardner because it's from Michigan. Makes sense, right? And so the pros of their packages are they're bright, they're just close-up photos, pretty naturally colored. It looks like the thing that you're going to grow. They have decently descriptive details. They show the zones that this plant will grow in and the plant height, which is, like I said before, it's very important. So they have everything you need on their packet. Also, their website is really good. It has a lot of information. The owner actually has a really good YouTube channel, if you just look up M.I. Gardner. So they have all kinds of gardening tips and tricks and talking about different varieties. So it's a fun one. And like I said, not really anything, no cons for their packets that I can really see. And so the next one is Johnny Select Seeds, and they're out of Maine, so way on East Coast. Pros, lots of technical information. A large variety of hybrids also available on their site. This company is actually a commercial seed provider also. They mostly sell large quantities for market gardeners, large growers, greenhouse growers. So you got to keep that in mind because their packets do not have pictures. Wah, wah. They are very technical. So talking about seed spreading dimensions. So it is dealing with machinery for a lot of these, but they do have the basics. They also don't list a plant height, but if you're a professional buying from them, you probably know how tall your plants are going to be. So these two, I also have to write on them if tomatoes are determinate or indeterminate, how high things are getting. But they do have days to maturity, so that's included. The next one is Seed Savers Exchange, and they're out of Iowa. So I tend to think they're more local to me since I'm in Minnesota. Pros to their packaging is they're natural looking photos of plants. They're pretty basic. They do have nice detailed descriptions. They also have an exchange trading platform that if you're a member, and I think you just have to register maybe. I'm a member and I've donated some money to them before. You have access to the exchange, the trading platform, where people post what seeds they have for sale or trade. So you can trade with people locally to your areas. A lot of heirloom seeds, people will save the ones that grow well where they are. So that's always a nice thing to search out. If you're having issues with commercial seeds that don't want to grow where you are, maybe you'll find somebody in your state or even closer to you who's had some good luck with heirloom seeds. And the cons, they don't list plant heights either, is Botanical Interests, and they're out of Colorado. They have beautiful hand-sketched plant renderings on their packets. So they're fun to shop, fun to buy, full color, and to me they look pretty natural. It shows what the plant is. Some of them have some floofy stuff with them, but the packets include all the information you could need, plus there is more on the inside. There's suggestions, tips for using the plant, so much information. You don't even need the internet for this company's seed packets. This website has great blog posts and more information about using these plants, and they have a great variety. I usually find a new plant every year. They have some interesting things. Let's see, the cons. The extra information is inside the packet, so you have to rip it open in order to read it, or if you can try to read what's inside. I've tried, I can't read everything. So that's the only con, is you got to tear open the packet, and if you haven't used up all the seeds, it's sort of unable to get to. But still, I think they're by far my favorite seed packet, just because they're so pretty, and it's a smaller company too, so I like to support the smaller companies. Some new varieties I'm getting of tomatoes from Botanical Interest. So I'm trying to find a good piece tomato. I have tried a bunch of different ones, but I'm really going to try and focus and take notes and compare a couple different varieties. So from Botanical Interest, I have the Italian Roma Bush Roma, and that is a determinate type and should be ready in 80 days. So I'm going to try and pay attention to the calendar for these to actually see if they're pretty true to that. This next one is also a Bush Roma, and it's called Supremo, and that's a hybrid. That is a 68 days, so that is a whole week or more earlier than the other Romas. These are determinate, so I'm almost hoping that I will have tomatoes for 3 or 4 weeks straight, but a continuous amount, so I can do some decent canning and not have to pick and freeze a bunch in order to have enough to do a canning session. I also grabbed a San Marzano, and this I think is a real, at least I say it's a real classic Italian paste tomato. So it says it's heirloom. It's a pole Roma, which means it's indeterminate and it will grow wherever it wants to go. So this one I'm going to try and put on a trellis, maybe up a bean pole, and then onto a fence or something, try to really support it. Because I've had tomatoes that their tallest pieces can grow 12 to 15 feet if they like their spot and they have some space to climb. So they are climbers if you let them. So I'm hoping that one will just be a good fill-in for these other two. And this is also a Roma. So lots of different Romas, just trying to find a good favorite to cling to. All right, another tomato, again from Botanical Interest. I guess it was on a tomato kick with them. I found a super early one. It's called Glacier. So this one is a 55-day from transplanting cherry tomato. So we shall see. This one is from, I think it says Sweden. So, there's a bunch of Swedes and Norwegians in Minnesota. I feel partial to trying fruits and vegetables that grow there. Probably will grow here pretty well. Early cherry, that's always nice to have to start off an early salad season, because it's such a pain when your lettuce is dying when your tomatoes are finally ready. I didn't say what I got from M.I. Gardner. I had a bunch of herbs from them, perennial native species. I got anise, St. John's wort, I got a lemon mint, marshmallow, and a fun one, spilanthes, the toothache plant. It's one that numbs your mouth, so I don't know. I just wanted to try it because it looks fun. And fenugreek, got that for some tea. So a lot of herbs from M.I. Gardner. Some new peppers I'm trying are the Sugar Rush Peach pepper. That's from Bigger, and I've seen it on multiple YouTube gardeners, and they look good, and they say they grow well. So I'm going to try them. They're an 80-day pepper, so that should grow just fine where we are. And then, but I read a couple times that this thing, the Sugar Rush, can grow 5 to 6 feet tall. I'm assuming that's in the proper tropical environment, but many people say to cage it. So I'm going to cage this pepper just to make sure it stays standing tall. And the next one is the shishito pepper. Also, I learned about it from different YouTube gardeners. People just saute it. It's an Asian pepper, a Japanese heirloom it's called. Not called, but considered. A good sauteer. We do lots of good vegetable sautés and stir fries, so they should be pretty good. And this one is, I think, a 60 to 80 day. Oh, this one's 80 days. So yeah, so these should be ready at the same time. Add some nice color to the pepper supply. So I'm excited to try those. We're also doing our normal jalapenos, habaneros, and the orange bell peppers I get from Johnny's that grow insanely well for some reason in my raised beds. They're a hybrid. That was the Glow F1 OG, so no seed saving for these ones. F1 just means the first filial, first something or other. It's just the first generation of this plant, and so it is not an heirloom, so you can't save the seeds because it'll grow one of the parents, not the actual beautiful orange pepper. But the plants grow prolific, and it was nice big peppers, so I'm going to do those again. Usually I try just different varieties of beets because I love a good beet. It's my favorite root vegetable besides carrots. I don't grow carrots. I don't think my raised beds composted enough down. I started them with the hugelkultur method. I love saying that. Hugelkultur? I don't know. And there's a lot of dead wood, chunky wood in there, so I don't know if there'd be a soft enough space yet for it to grow longer carrots. I think I'm going to wait another year or two to make sure all of that stuff is broken down. I have a metal lockbox that I keep my seeds in. I'm not sure what else it would be used for. It's super old. It's one of those big metal boxes you find in people's garage sales. That's exactly where I found it, and it's perfect for seeds. So that's what I use for my seed storage. Some people use picture cases, like scrapbooking things, but I'm not going to spend all that money on plastic containers. I just found a box at a rummage sale, and it works just fine. I actually need a bigger one, but I can also go through my seeds and get rid of ones that I don't use. Next topic, regarding seed labels, how companies advertise. And so I wanted to clarify something and get a little nerdy. I had to do a little research too to make sure I wasn't saying anything that wasn't true. Maybe for new gardeners or even experienced gardeners, it's about the non-GMO label that people get their undies in a bunch about. They get all excited. They love to say that their seeds and plants are non-GMO. Well, I'm going to blow your mind. There are actually no GMO seeds that are available to the general public to grow food, vegetables, period. They are not available. GMOs, aka genetically modified organisms, are in commercial field crops. So corn, soy, sugar beets, and only 10 other things. Yes, there are only 13 GMO crops registered with the United States. And within the USA GMO crops, most of them are for animal feed. So take it for what it means to you. So don't pay for that label or think that those seeds are any better than those that don't scream the non-GMO label. It may have come from back in the 90s. That's when the Safe Seed Pledge started. And that was a tactic in the 90s from the Council for Responsible Genetics, a supposed nonprofit of genetic and DNA activists and advocates. It doesn't actually exist anymore in the United States. I think there's an offshoot in the UK, but that's an interesting thing to look up. The pledge was for companies to differentiate themselves and offer an alternative. An alternative to what? I don't know, because nothing else existed at that time. That's what that is all about. So some of the older companies, you will see on their pages or listed somewhere that they signed the Safe Seed Pledge. Well, that's what it's from. Enough time has passed. I think a lot of younger people just don't know what that's about. But they might feel that companies that signed a pledge is, nice. It gives a whiff of good intentions that we want all of our favorite seed companies to have, because we want to know where our food comes from and we want to know and think that it's safe. Trust me, bioengineering, which is what GMO is called nowadays, that can probably reach end consumer seeds someday. And at this point, we don't know if that would be a good or a bad thing. I think there are plenty of decent alliances, nonprofits, and other groups that are doing the good work of seed saving, especially working on regionally based seeds and hybrids that maintain the awareness about the strength and importance of heirlooms. That may just keep the need for bioengineered seeds to be a non-event. So I think more clarity needs to be conveyed, more about the terms of hybrid, organic, and heirloom and what they mean, instead of fear-mongering with GMO acronyms, hashtags, and higher price tags. That's my soapbox about non-GMO. Remember, the world is your garden. You can flourish wherever you're planted.